Hi folks, here's a quick tutorial on how to adjust the exposure settings on this Panasonic DMC-G7 cameras that are available at the library. So what I'm going to show you in this video is how to adjust what we call the Holy Trinity, the three basic exposure controls on pretty much any camera. And those three are your ISO, which controls the camera's basic sensitivity to the light. Your shutter speed, which is the speed at which your lens opens and shuts, and your f-stop, or your also known as your aperture speed. So the f-stop is the setting and the aperture is what that setting actually controls, and that's how wide or how small the camera lens opens and shuts. So how wide it opens or how small it opens and shuts when you click the shutter. So to get started, what you want to do is make sure that this wheel here is set to M for manual, so you can have entirely manual settings. Once you've done that, you want to set your ISO. So in this view, you can see your ISO button is right here. Once you push that button, you're going to use this wheel at the top right of the body of the camera, and you're going to spin that left or right depending on how high or how low you want your ISO setting to be. So the higher up it is, the more sensitive to light it is. So in other words, you set it up high when it's dark out, and you set it lower and get a finer grain image when you set it lower when you have more light. So you're going to click the ISO button, and then you're going to use that wheel to adjust it, which you're seeing right here, twisting it left and right. And I would recommend that a good default setting for this is going to be about 800 for your typical day. Now, if it's bright out, you can go down to 400 or even 200 or lower. But if it's dark, you can keep going up and up and up depending on how dark it is. The higher you go, though, the grainier your image is going to be. So once you've set your ISO, you're pretty much going to leave that alone until the light conditions change. And in order to do that, in order to finally set it, you're going to hit this middle button there for set, and then you're going to see it here. And then what that's going to do is that's going to automatically shift over so that you can start to adjust your shutter speed, which is the value you're seeing here with the 1/125th of a second. So you're going to use this dial again. So you're going to hit this set button in the middle here to go from setting your ISO, once you've got that set, to setting your shutter speed. And then again, you're going to go back to this dial to adjust your shutter speed. So I'm saying a good default for a nice sunny day is 1/125th of a second. If in fact you're inside, your typical default might be 1/60th of a second. So that's a slower shutter speed. So once you set the shutter speed, you again hit the middle button for set, and now you're ready to set your f-stop. So in order to set your f-stop, what you want to do is hit this FN2 button. That's going to enable you to click through different screen modes until you get to your aperture setting. So once you hit your FN2 button, you're going to toggle through the different screen modes with either of these two buttons. This button that says WB over here on the right, or this box, this one with the box icon on the left. If you keep clicking this WB, you're going to click through a bunch of screen modes on the camera. So as you're going to be able to see here from this image, here's your next setting on there, and you'll click through this one. So you can see there are several screen modes in order to get to your f-stop. So not ideal. I wish it was just a simple control on the body of the camera, but you're going to have to keep clicking that button maybe until you get to something that's going to say aperture value, which is right here. Once you get to here, again, you're going to use this dial at the top right of the body of the camera to set it. Now, a lot of what you're doing when you're adjusting your shutter speed and your f-stop and toggling between the two is getting the right amount of light, but also making sure that you have the right depth of field. So the aperture, which is again the f-stop controls the aperture, and that's how wide or how small the lens opens and shuts when it snaps the picture. That controls what's called your depth of field. Your depth of field is what determines what's in focus. So if you have a shallow depth of field, that means that things very close to the camera lens are in focus, but everything farther in the background, so farther away from the camera lens, is going to be a blur. Whereas a deep depth of field or large depth of field is going to bring everything into focus in the camera. And it's just going to take some practice and experience for you to learn how to manipulate your f-stop in order to determine your depth of field. You have to look at what you're doing with the camera in order to do that. But the most important thing that you want to do is make sure that you have a decent exposure setting. So as you're adjusting, here's your shutter speed value, and here's your f-stop, or your also known as your aperture value. As you're adjusting that, you're going to see how the exposure is doing with this all-important light meter. Now, as you can see from this photo, it's showing -3. That means that it's underexposed. So what you would probably want to do is you would lower the shutter speed to slow down the speed at which it's taking the picture and let in more light, bringing this value up closer to 0. What you want for a perfectly exposed image is for this light meter to be right at 0. Now you may be wondering what the hell this thing is. It can be distracting, and that's just a wavelength graph that you actually don't need at this level for your photography, so you want to get rid of it. So the way to get rid of this thing so that it's not distracting you as you're snapping pictures is you want to hit this display button. Let me see if I can get you a better view of it. So right here, you want to hit this button and toggle through the different, if you hit it once, that wavelength box should just disappear right away. Then if you keep hitting this display button, you'll cycle through different display modes. So for example, I just showed you the main display mode, but eventually you've also got the one that looks like this. And that's pretty much all you need to know in order to set your Holy Trinity, your ISO, again, your shutter speed, which is this value here, and your f-stop, which is your aperture, which is this value here. It's just going to take practice in order for you to determine how best to set those so that you've got the right exposures and the right depth of field. Here again is your light meter, so this is a good screen mode to be in if you want to make sure your light meter, you want it right at 0. But that's pretty much everything you need to know to manipulate the exposure settings on the camera. If you have any questions, send me an email, but I hope that works for you.